Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I should say. I'm really excited to be here for our third installment of the Introduction to Motivational Interviewing, or How to Stop Wrestling with Your Patients. What a great day today. It's just beautiful, beautiful sunshine. I'm Dr. Tori Rogers, the Medical Director of Let's Go, and I'm here with Emily Walters from Let's Go and Nicole O'Brien, and they're going to help me today. So here are, again, the learning objectives for the webinar series. We want to introduce you guys to the concepts of MI, describe the key techniques of MI, and really spark an interest in taking a more in-depth course. Here's where we are for today. We're going to talk about reflective listening. Oh, I'm going to go back to that one because one of the things about reflective listening, for me, it's probably the single most impactful technique in MI. It really helps me understand more about what the patient's motivation is or resistance is. It takes some practice and it isn't always easy, but it really helps get that dance started. So here's the agenda for today. I want to do a quick review of what we've done. That'll only take about 5 minutes. And then we're going to describe this rolling with resistance and reflective listening. We're going to do some batting practice, and then we're going to open it up to any questions that you might have. So again, throughout the webinar series, I'm going to be referring to the Let's Go MI guide. Sometimes on some of the top right-hand corner of the slides, you might see page 7 or page 11, and you can turn to the guide, and that will help you see where we are within the whole concept here of MI. So you can find it online or just email us if you want a hard copy of it. Now for just a short refresher of what we've covered over the last 2 weeks. You remember, MI is a patient-centered guiding style for enhancing motivation to change by exploring and resolving ambivalence. Again, the key words are in bold: patient-centered, enhancing motivation, and resolving that ambivalence. We talked about how this is a shift in how we communicate with our patients. Again, you remember, it's more guiding versus directing, less focused on fixing and persuading, and more focused on seeking understanding and collaboration. It sees the patient as the expert on themselves. It accepts the patient's ambivalence and fluctuations as normal. Remember, we talked a lot about this, and in behavior change, even if we think we need to get more exercise or maybe eat more fruits and vegetables, we may be ambivalent about it. We might not think, they tell me I need to eat 9 to 13 servings of fruits and vegetables, but I'm not sure I really buy it. That's ambivalence there. That's like, I don't understand the importance of it. Or it might be, I know I need to eat 9 to 13 servings of fruits and vegetables, and they're really important for my health, and I just don't know how I'm going to do it. And that just shows that I don't have the confidence to maybe do it. So the idea about accepting the patient's ambivalence and fluctuations is very normal. The last two are also important. Again, remember, we see any progress as progress. So most of the behavior change that we're talking about in healthy eating, active living are not going to be flipping a switch. Most of us just don't decide one day to wake up and run a 10K or wake up and all of a sudden become vegan, right? Most of these are going to be slow, small steps that people make, and any progress is progress. And again, that relapse is not a failure. It's a learning opportunity. So most of the patients that you're working with, especially if you're working with adults, have tried many times to get healthier and lose weight, and they've sometimes been successful and sometimes they've had that relapse. And that's that learning opportunity there. And last week, we talked a lot about open-ended questions, and here are a few of the key elements about these types of questions. We mentioned that you use these in the beginning of the conversation, right, to get the ball rolling, and no more than 2 or 3 of these questions before you start moving on to understand more about the patient's reluctance or resistance to change. So the open-ended questions do the following. They get the ball rolling. They can't be answered with a yes or no. They use the patient's own words, and they're not biased or judgmental. Let's review those open versus closed-ended questions. So closed-ended questions. Did you have a great vacation? Are you depressed? Is your job going okay? Don't you know you will get diabetes if you don't quit don't you know you'll get diabetes if you don't quit drinking soda? And then open-ended questions. Tell me about your vacation. Help me understand a little bit how you're feeling. What's going on with your job? What connection, if any, do you see with the soda drinking and diabetes? Again, these open-ended questions in the beginning of the conversation help you really get the ball going, help you understand more about what's happening in the patient and their family. And again, this concept here is really important, and it has helped me understand why it's important to do both of these things. You comfort the afflicted, which means you're expressing empathy and really listening. And we'll be doing a lot of that with reflective listening today. And once you've comforted your patient and you listen to their story, you let them drain that swamp of negativity, then you can inflict the comfortable, which means that you show the patient the discrepancy between the patient's ultimate goals and what their daily actions are, and how they are maybe in direct contrast to their values and goals. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today. And we also talked about the essence of motivational interviewing using rolling with resistance and reflective listening, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And remember, this is where the dancing comes in. The basic concept is to not argue with your patients, and you just need to sit back and listen. And sometimes, it's not that we ever think we're arguing with our patients, right? But we are. So when they give us these negative comments and they say things like, "There's no way that I can eat healthy, Dr. Rogers. I just can't. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time." And when I say things like, "Oh, sure you do. Just go down to Whole Foods at this great little salad bar. You can get all the salads you want, and you get the frozen fruits and vegetables." That may not sound like arguing, but that's exactly what the patients hear. They just hear that we didn't hear any of their real issues, and we're arguing with them about that. So rolling with resistance is using reflective listening and not arguing, just listening and reflecting back what you hear. And then you want to find meaning for that change. And we're going to talk more about this next week, but that refers to what the patient's values and goals are. And this is where they find meaning in making the change. I mentioned, I think, Tim Goltz maybe on the first call, because Tim does a great thing, which I'm sure many of you do, and maybe Danny, maybe you do this with your patients too, but in the very beginning when he has a new patient come into his office, he spends a few minutes just talking about what's important to the patients and understanding their values and their goals in life that may be health related and maybe not, but as Tim said, that helps him understand where he can help work with the patients around their health related goals. So that's a little bit about what we've done in the last couple weeks. So now moving on to try to understand how we're going to learn more about the patient's reluctance to change or resistance to change. So let's take this example here. So a patient might say, or a mother might say, "We eat at Wendy's a few times a week. It's cheap, it's fast, my kids like it, it's better than those other places. There's a lot worse we could be eating. Sure, there are better foods than that, but I don't have time to cook." So here, this is really interesting. So what you might want to reflect back and say something like is, you care about your child and you want to feed her healthy foods. It's just tough right now, given how little time you have. So ideally, you would prefer not to be eating out as much fast food. So again, that was reflecting back. I could have said, you shouldn't be eating at Wendy's at all, and you could just go over to Hannaford and get the frozen fruits and vegetables and cook. I could have said that, but by reflecting back, things like, you care about your child and you want her to eat healthy foods. It's just tough now, given how little time you have. What that did is help affirm the mother's concern for her child's health. And also, you didn't want to debate whether Wendy's was better than McDonald's, right? Because that's just not a conversation you want to have. But affirming that the mom is concerned about the child's health is going to make her feel like, yeah, the doc gets this. So what we just did there was that reflective listening. So what really is this? Well, as we talked about, open-ended questions get the ball rolling and get it started. This keeps the ball rolling. It's a statement, it's not a question. And that's really important because, I'll talk about this a bit over the next 20 minutes, is that questions can be really sometimes condescending, sometimes overwhelming, and a statement isn't a question. So the patient doesn't have to feel they have to answer it. It finds meaning in that statement. And we'll talk about how do you have a reflection that gives a little more meaning to it by adding maybe in some feeling to it. Ken Resnickow, the guru that I talk about all the time out at Michigan, talks a lot about it ends with a downturn. So what he means is, I don't know if any of you know about sort of upturning talk. That's sort of the Valley girls who say, "Oh, it's a really beautiful day. Oh my gosh, look at the sun. It's so awesome." And that kind of upturn makes people sort of wonder, like, is that a question there? So if I would just say, like, "Emily, you look really great today," versus, "Emily, you look great today." So a reflective listening ends with a downturn. It's more of a demonstrative statement instead of saying like, Emily, you do a really good job with Gideon. And that upturn makes you go, really? Does that? Versus, Emily, you're a great parent with Gideon. She's smiling now. The fourth thing is you want to build rapport and keep the patient thinking and talking. The whole idea, going back to it, is the patient needs to talk more than you. And that's a hard one. Remember, I told you it's a really hard one for me. But when you reflect back and you have a statement that ends with a downturn, you will allow that patient to then give you more information, and it keeps them talking. What reflective listening also does, it affirms and it validates where the patient is. You can also do this thing they call hypothesis testing. And I love this one. And sometimes I use this, and I know I have a couple staff members here, but sometimes I'll use this in a staff meeting too, and I'll say, if I understand you correctly, what it sounds like is you really can't take on another project right now. So that whole idea is if I understand you correctly, you're not saying you can't take on another project right now. You're sort of saying, if I understand you correctly, it sounds like you're really busy, and now's not a good time for another project. And what they might say is, well, I don't know, I didn't say it. I didn't say I didn't have any time for another project. I just said I was really busy. But again, the idea that you can do hypothesis testing, kind of put it out there in a statement way without asking a question, it's way more effective than the questions. Okay, so now let's get into some of these what we call safe reflections. What Ken likes to say is you're not going to get into any trouble using these kind of starters. And I know it must feel funny to think back as a provider that you're just reflecting back what the patient said to you. And when I first started this, I thought, oh, this is going to be really awkward, that I'm just going to say things like, it sounds like you're feeling really overwhelmed, and I felt awkward until when I would say things to patients like, it sounds like you're really overwhelmed. It sounds like you're not happy with your job right now. It sounds like you're having trouble getting your kids to eat fruits and vegetables. So you're saying that you're having trouble with your spouse and he's not doing what you'd like him to do around the house? Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard you say was that now's not the time to add in more fruits and vegetables to his diet. When I said those statements in a way that actually I meant them too, you have to mean it. What I found is the conversation immediately changed. The patient was all of a sudden like, yeah, you're right. It is really hard for me. I don't know if now is the time that we're going to start fruits and vegetables. All of a sudden, there was a weight off my shoulder that I had to sort of get to a new place in that conversation. And the patient was coming and the parent was coming at me with more information. So these are really great starters for a reflection. And we're going to come back. I showed this slide a couple times. This is also in the flip chart too. You can also, as you improve, and you'll see this at the end where I do some batting practice with Emily and Nicole, you'll see that you can truncate the reflection and you get more impact. So instead of saying things like, it sounds like you're not ready to get fruits and vegetables going in your diet now, you can say, you're not ready to do that. It's a little more demonstrative, it feels a little more pushy, but it actually moves that conversation a little further down the line. So there are some of these, you're not ready to start getting exercise. You're having a problem with figuring out how to cook a healthy meal at the end of the day. You're feeling that your children don't listen to you. It's been difficult for you to get back to work now and try to figure out how to breastfeed and be working full time. You're frustrated your children don't come out of the room at night to have a conversation with you. So again, the top ones are perfect and they're great. The bottom ones just push you along a little more in the conversation. So let's, there we go. So let's take some questions that we would normally ask them, make them a reflection. And there's nothing wrong with questions, right? We talk about open-ended questions, and sometimes you do have to ask those closed-ended questions. But the reason I want to do this is to drive home the point that by just asking the question, you're not really understanding more about what's happening with the patient and their motivation for change or the reasons to not change. So here's an example. The patient says, I'm very worried about my diabetes. It runs in my family. I've lost many relatives to it, and I want to break the cycle. So think what you might say to this. A normal, typical question could easily be, so how many relatives have had diabetes? And the patient's going to say, 5. So did that help you at all? I don't think so. Another question is, have you thought about breaking this cycle? Again, of course the patients thought about breaking the cycle, right? They probably think about it all the time. They say they're worried about it. So instead of asking those questions, you could reflect back and say something like, there's a lot of diabetes in your family. You might have some thoughts about how to break that cycle. Again, patients are the experts on themselves. They've thought about this, guys. They actually have some good ideas. They just don't always know how to do them. Or to say, again, this is putting meaning into it. You are scared about your diabetes getting worse, right? You put it right out there. So, again, you're going to get a lot more information about what's going on with the patients with reflections instead of questions. Reflective listening adds value to that statement, and it puts empathy and understanding in there. So here's an example. I'll put it up there. I never see my daughter. She's up in her room all the time. She eats there, and I know it's not really healthy food. And she's on her phone or laptop all the time, and I don't really know what's going on in her world. So it would be perfectly fine to ask the following. So how does that make you feel? Right? That would be okay to do. But MI tells us that we're going to get a lot more information by reflecting back something like this. You're sad about that. Because that's what when I see this quote, I see sadness from the mom. Maybe it's the mom in me too. But I see the sadness is that she really wants to know what's going on in her daughter's world, and she feels that she's not seeing her daughter. The previous reflection, I added that feeling of sadness because that's what I was picking up on, right? So here are some words you can add to those reflections that will bring out more information from the patients. And it's okay if you overshoot and say something like from the example before, right? The example before, I could have said, you are so disappointed in your daughter. And in this case, I think the mom would have corrected me and said something like, well, actually, no, I'm not disappointed in her. I think she's a great kid. She does well in school. She plays sports. She has a few friends. I just never see her, and I worry what she's doing in her room, and I worry about her food intake. So even though I overstepped and said, you're disappointed in your daughter, quickly the mom came back and put me and let me know what was really going on. And by doing this, a couple things that were really important is I heard the mom say some really positive statements about her daughter, which is helpful. So I could follow up. If I did overstate and the mom came back and said, no, you didn't get it right, I could follow up and reflect back something like this. Oh, I see you're really proud of your daughter and her accomplishments, and you're worried that she might not be eating the most healthy foods. So pretty quickly, in about 30 seconds, we could have gotten down to the real issue and also understand some of the values and some of the positive statements that the mom had about her daughter. Again, we wouldn't be having this conversation if the daughter was sitting right there. That would, yeah. So going back to this a slide about all of these feelings, and there's reflections, adding feelings to your reflections. These are some words. Some may seem kind of harsh, right? You're overwhelmed, you're struggling, you're drained, you're hopeless. Now, that's a big one. But you put them out there sometimes because the patient will say, no, I'm not hopeless. I'm just kind of feeling overwhelmed. So it's okay to overshoot. Let's see. So we're going to do another one. So here's another example. I'll read this, and I'd like you to think for a minute about what you might say, okay? So don't worry, Danny or Carol or Nan or Casey or Adrian. I'm not going to call you guys out, but I want you guys to be thinking how you would take this statement and reflect back. So here's the statement. I know I should fix more meals at home and not bring home food from fast food restaurants so often. But I'm exhausted all day, and I just don't have the energy to spend 2 hours in the kitchen. And even if I do cook at home, the kids don't want to eat what I fix. They're just going to ask for chicken nuggets and pizza. So think about it for a minute. Use some of these statements here that you could think about how you might reflect back and start thinking about it. You can write something down. I'll give you guys about 30 seconds, and I'll come back. Okay, wasn't quite 30 seconds, but I know we're a little short on time. So here's how I might reflect back. I might say something like, it sounds like you're really busy at the end of the day and you want to provide healthy options for your family. Or I might say, providing healthy food to your family is really important to you and you don't have the time or energy at the end of the day to make a meal. Or I might even say, you're really frustrated. It's really frustrating to you that when you do cook, your kids don't eat what you prepare. Again, different levels of intensity there. So let's go on now to another one. Oh, whoops, sorry. Right. So here's a television one. I know TV is bad for him, but I need some peace and quiet in the house. I'm a single mom. I don't have a lot of help. Having him watch TV helps me get my housework and schoolwork done. He's happy, content, and frankly, I don't have to worry about him and entertain him. So think a little bit about, again, I'll put this up. You can start thinking about a reflection using one of these starters. So here's what I might reflect back on this. And what I'm doing in all of these things is I'm looking for emotion here, right? I'm looking for emotion. I'm looking for any values that the patient may be saying or bringing to the forefront in this pretty negative statement. So I might say something like, it seems like you're really busy and letting your son watch TV helps you get other things done. Now that might seem like, really, how does that move the conversation forward? What I have is I haven't been judgmental on her. I might also say, you do a lot for your son and you don't have any help. Or I might say something like, you are frustrated that you don't have more help with your son. Or you could also say, you really care about providing a healthy environment for your son and you know that TV isn't great for him. That last reflection, I tried to show the discrepancy between her values of a healthy environment and what she's doing. This will lead to a deeper conversation about what options may be available for her to consider in the future. We'll talk more about this next week. Okay. So lastly, reflective listening is more effective than questioning. I hope I've been bringing that home. Now we're going to try this thing called batting practice. And Nicole and Emily are going to help me. They're going to have resistance statements, and they will come at me. And I'm a huge baseball fan, so I love this. So what happens here is they're going to be pitching a lot of negative statements at me, and I'm going to try to use reflective listening, roll with resistance to bat them away. A couple of disclaimers I want to say here. I'm not an expert on MI. I probably should have told you guys in the first webinar if I didn't. But I'm not an expert in batting practice either. So you're going to see I'm going to miss a few. But that's okay because you don't have to hit a home run. Just some foul tips. It can get you really close. The patient won't get angry if your reflections are inaccurate. They simply will correct you if you're wrong. So let's play ball. We're going to start with Nicole. We're going to go for... they have, I think, 10 each. So we're just I'm gonna take a sip of water. All right. Okay, Nicole.
I can't exercise. I just don't have the time.
You're really busy.
You know, it's really hard. After school, our house is a complete zoo, and it's really just easier for everyone in our family to do their own thing and just eat on their own. I know it's not the best choice, but it's really all we have.
Sounds like you care about healthy choices for your kids, and it's really busy at the end of the day.
I don't have time to relax and focus on me. Someone always needs something in my house.
You are the go-to person. Everybody comes to you.
You know, I hear all about people saying you should spend time, sit down, eat breakfast together as a family or have a meal together as a family. But you know what? We do all we can just to catch the bus on time in the morning. So the last thing that I'm able to do is to sit down and make sure that everyone's having a breakfast together.
Sounds like you get a lot of advice from other people.
You know, honestly, I'm told to eat healthy all the time, but fruits and vegetables, they go bad before we even get a chance to eat them all. What's the point?
Very frustrating for you to buy the fruits and vegetables and then they go to waste.
You know, I know that water is the best choice for me, but I just can't stand the taste.
You hate water.
Well, I don't know if I hate water, but I don't like it when it just comes straight out of the tap. Right. I really can't exercise. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't want to look dumb.
You don't have any time to exercise at all.
Well, no, I really want to exercise, but I'm embarrassed. Let's see. Well, after working all day, working a 40-hour-a-week job, and I get home and I really just need to be preparing dinner, I have a really hard time. The kids using their iPad is the only way to keep them entertained.
You cook a lot of meals, and that's great. And the iPad helps you entertain the kids. And yet that's probably not the best thing for them.
Yeah.
We'll do a few more and then.
Yeah. So eating healthy, exercising, all of it. I have little kids at home. My husband works a lot. I don't have a lot of help.
It sounds like you don't get a lot of help from your husband.
That's true.
Okay, and last one.
Last one. If I'm going to have to drag Gideon to Violet's tumbling practice and have to deal with him complaining the whole time that he's there, I'm going to just let him use his iPad.
You letting Gideon use his iPad helps you be with Violet at her tumbling practice. Okay, guys, so that's batting practice. You can do it in your own office. I don't know if I got a home run very much, but I think I hopefully reflected back. How did you guys feel about it? Em or Nicole?
I thought there were a couple times that your reflection using the feelings, it absolutely nailed it. Like it made me want to. I actually a couple times like, oh, well, I have your attention, Dr. Rogers.
Yeah, something tells me we're gonna have a therapy lesson back here.
Good.
And Nicole?
Agreed, absolutely. And then when you didn't, we could kick back. And it started a conversation.
Well, cool, good. Okay, great. So moving on. So I want to remind you guys that we've talked about lots of different concepts, and there is a framework that we put this all together with. So again, you start off by exploring and understanding what the patient is, asking these open-ended questions and doing the reflective listening. You get permission to have the conversation. We're comforting the afflicted here, draining the swamp of negativity, building some rapport. The guys were feeling pretty good about things, expressing empathy. You can explore the pros and cons, right? We did that. Using the iPad helps out a lot to keep them occupied, and yet it's not what you really want to be doing. The next thing that we're going to be doing next week is really guiding, talking about the importance and confidence, values and strength. And then you close the encounter down by hopefully eliciting the change talk from people. And that's where you might have heard Emily or Nicole say what they would like to do. And you set some small goals. Remember, any change is positive. You build that menu of options and they choose from it. So a homework assignment, if you want, reflect back to somebody today or tomorrow. You could start off to hear a couple things that I thought about your partner. So maybe your partner says that they're paying the bills, they're figuring out who's going to take the kiddos to soccer, and they're really complaining. You get home from work and they're like, oh, I paid all the bills. I don't know who's going to take the kid to soccer, and I don't know what we're going to have for dinner. And you might say, sounds like you have a lot on your plate and you're trying to juggle it all. Okay, the next thing, so your colleague, maybe one of your other physicians says they don't want to do another one of those quality projects, blah, blah, blah. And you've heard it all before from them. But instead of wrestling with her, you might try to roll with resistance and say something like, it sounds like you feel these quality projects haven't helped you manage your patients, and you feel that it takes away quality time from your busy day. Again, what that's going to do is open up a better conversation instead of you just sort of rolling your eyes. You want to roll with resistance and not roll your eyes. Lastly, your patient states that they don't have enough time, enough money to buy fruits and vegetables, and you could say something like this: money's tight for your family. So think about maybe using some of these reflections, and think about reflecting back to somebody. So any questions or thoughts that we have a few minutes? Does anybody want to put anything in here? Put anything through the chat box? A quiet little bunch today. That's okay. You can, a couple things. Nicole's going to be sending out today a copy of the slides. It will be in a PDF format because they're too big to be sent out. And then, as we have been saying, these are recorded, and we'll have recordings up at the end of the month. So thank you guys for your time. And again, same time, same place. Next week, we're going to talk about change talk. Okay, thanks, guys.